Unity and community. The question that should concern us is, what does unity mean? What does it take to accomplish and promote unity? And as helpful as looking at these questions is the question of what is the antithesis of unity? Namely, what would undermine our efforts at advancing unity? Or rather, what are the things that for sure will put your community and my community apart and will drive us in any direction but that of unity? Now, I know I'm sounding very ambiguous. Sorry. I'll be very clear in a minute. This is from a landmark ruling over who is a Jew, in which I had the privilege of arguing the case before the Supreme Court. And I should say the happy ending is we won, as we did on every who is a Jew case before the Supreme Court. And Barak provides us with the unique sort of capturing the essence of the controversy in a nutshell. And he is saying the state refuses to recognize Reform conversions and conservative conversions. Why? Because the state argues that all the Jews in Israel constitute one Jewish community, quote unquote, that in the religious realm, at the helm of that unified Jewish community stands the chief rabbinate. And therefore, if you want to be recognized as a member of the Jewish community, you need to have the approval of the chief rabbinate. That, in a nutshell, says Barak, is the reason, the rationale put forth by the Ministry of the Interior. By the way, Natan Sharansky, Minister of the Interior, who had no compunction signing affidavits that Reform and conservative conversion should not be recognized. But, and by the way, again, takes us to the question of unity and the controversy over unity. Natan Sharansky at the time, at the height of the Who is a Jew debate then, was interviewed by Gary Rosenblatt, right here in New York. And Sharansky is quoted as saying, many people are calling me angry with the fact that we, the Yisrael Ba'aliyah, the party that he led, was voting for the amendment that would have resulted with the exclusion of conservative and Reform conversions. And they're angry at me. But he says, they don't understand. They don't get the point. The point is, says Sharansky, that since we have so many groups and ethnic and dispersions, etc., I don't remember the exact word he uses to describe it, but basically multiplicity of groups, ethnically and religiously, etc., coming to Israel, in order to maintain Jewish unity, we need one rabbinic authority. That was the point that he made. Except the Supreme Court wouldn't buy that point. Says Chief Justice Barak, with the consent of the majority of the judges, he says, yes, the notion of Jewish community, religious community, appears in Israeli legislation back from mandatory period. Not Ottoman, but mandatory. But this is a mandatory, with a capital M, mandatory colonial attitude that has no place in the state of Israel. And here is the key point that makes me regret so much that this paragraph from Barak's ruling is not better known and used. He says, Israel is not the state of the Jewish community, quote unquote. Israel is the state of the Jewish people. Within Judaism, there are different streams, that operate in Israel and beyond, each and every Jew in Israel, as well as each and every non-Jewish person, is entitled the freedom of religion, conscience, and association. Our basic precepts grant each and every individual the liberty to decide on his affiliation with one stream or another. And on the basis of that, the state's position that the chief rabbinate's approval is necessary in order to be included in the Jewish fold in Israel, in the state of Israel, was rejected. And it was repeatedly rejected when additional attempts by the Ministry of the Interior really created some anger on the part of the justices. And at one point he says, that which we have already rejected through the door, you are now trying to bring us back through the window. So if you'll go to the next one. So the question, one of the questions is that I come across very often is, so how do Israelis feel about you getting involved in these issues? And some of you may know there was a very important study commissioned by the New York Federation, and there were other studies done by ADL and by AJC, in which the question of how do Israelis feel about American Jewish intervention or involvement in policing SETI matters in Israel stand. And I think that it all depends on what question exactly you are asking. Because, truth be told, when the issue is where should the border pass, what kind of security measures should be taken, what kind of risks should Israel be allowing, I would say the average Israeli has a difficult time and great ambivalence feeling that yes, Israel should take into consideration American Jewish views as to how these security measures should be conducted. So I asked a different question that has to do with unity and uniformity. I asked, actually the question was, Jewish federations and organizations are getting engaged in advancing religious freedom and equality in Israel, such as allowing for civil marriages and doing away with the monopoly of the chief rabbinate. Is that something that you support or oppose? And when you ask that question, not should the American Jewish leadership be suggesting or telling Israel how we should conduct our security affairs, but when you ask about the question of unity and uniformity, and in a minute we'll see a few more inside data, what you see is 68% say yes, bring it on. We welcome your intervention. We welcome your support. We welcome your support because we see you as partners in an endeavor to do what? Not to strengthen Reform or conservative Judaism in Israel. That's legitimate, but that's not the issue. The issue is, if you'll move it on, so please understand, I don't know how you individually define the goal of Zionism. There's, of course, the Jerusalem program. But to me, what it starts with, since this is about Israel, what it starts with is the spirit, the essence of Israel's Declaration of Independence. How can you seriously be engaged in the upbuilding of Zion and Israel without embracing the very clear vision, dream, promise of Israel's Declaration of Independence? And what does the Declaration of Independence say? Again, we don't repeat it often enough. And it certainly is not being repeated by the governmental circles in Israel. And it's being shunned by the likes who shun Reform and conservative and women of the wall at the Kotel. As far as they're concerned, not only is it not accepted, but it's heretical and should be abolished. So what does the Declaration of Independence say? It says the state of Israel will be open to Jewish migration from all corners of the world and will develop the resources of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based upon the precepts of liberty, justice, and peace as taught by the Hebrew prophets. It will ensure for social and political equality to all, regardless of religion, gender, or race. It will uphold freedom of religion, conscience, culture, education, etc. How much clearer can it be? The starting point for the state of Israel and the vision and the dream of the state of Israel is freedom of religion and conscience, equality, law of return, not theocracy, not Torah state, but liberty, justice, and peace as taught by the Hebrew prophets. Now, can we seriously suggest that the mainstream of Zionism then and today would not embrace this vision? Are we revisionists that are attempting to create something else than that founding statement of what Israel is about? Well, let me tell you, if there is any question, because I saw that Dani Dayan is one of the distinguished speakers here, and you may recall that Dani Dayan only recently was quoted in the Anglo-Jewish press as saying, regarding criticism coming from American Jewish circles, saying, you don't get it, and you don't respect it. Israel is a democracy, and this is the will of the majority. I have tremendous respect for Dani Dayan, but I can tell you with an insider's assurance, there is not a trace of truth to the claim that Dani Dayan makes, that Minister of Justice Ayelet Shaked makes, and a few others. There is no will of the majority that subscribes to the exclusion of non-Orthodox Judaism, no will of the majority that subscribes to the denial of religious freedom for secular Jews, etc., and you will see some of it here. So in January, we ran a survey. Sorry, this is the February survey. About 2 weeks ago, we ran a survey, and we asked the question of how would you like the government to be after the elections? With the two options being civil government that doesn't depend on the Haredi parties and promotes freedom of religion and equality, or a unity government. And again, we were careful to use a consensus, respectable terminology. Unity government, Memshelet Achdut, is something that has been common in quite a number of governments, and a unity government that includes the Haredi parties and maintains the status quo. And again, the status quo is sort of a nomenclature. It's a known term that we used. We didn't characterize it beyond that. But of course, status quo is what we in Israel call milim mechubasot. Namely, these are laundered words. Status quo sounds benign, but status quo is actually the label for religious coercion. So again, it is very clear where the Israeli adult Jewish population is. 63% want a civil government that will promote religious freedom and equality. Now, there are lots of breakdowns. I think I included one. Yes. So we asked the question, are issues of religious freedom and equality in shouldering the civic burden something that would impact on your decision whom to vote for? Is it something that's going to increase the likelihood that you'll vote for a party that subscribes to religious freedom and equality? Is it going to decrease, or would it not make a difference, or will it not make a difference? So among all respondents, and again, the sample is the adult Jewish population in Israel. Among all respondents, 52% say we are more likely to vote for a party that holds that view. only 13% said we are less likely to vote for such a party. Among the undecided voters, and that was in January, among the undecided voters, 64% are saying I'm more likely to vote for a party given some parity between the parties. Namely, it's not that I'm a right-winger, I'm going to vote for a left-wing party just because it promises religious freedom. Parties that are on par in terms of security, economy, which party would you prefer if such a parity existed? Now, as I said, our Minister of Justice is the one that has come out most vocally and publicly saying, Supreme Court judges, who elected you? By the way, this goes hand in hand with recent characterization of the position of the Attorney General due to the recent sensitive debates as senior clerk. The Attorney General, in their characterization, is but a senior clerk. So, Minister of Justice Shaked says, who appointed you? Who elected you? We represent the will of the people. We were elected. We represent the majority. You were appointed, and with all respect, better keep your views in check. So, in our annual Religion and State Index that we did in July of 2018, we asked the question, which of these public institutions do you have most trust in? Which do you have least trust in? And we listed 5. The Knesset, the government, the Supreme Court, the rabbinical courts, and the chief rabbinate. Now, the tragedy is that all of this discussion and the demonization of the Supreme Court and of the Attorney General brought about 39% who are saying, I don't trust any of them, which is a terrible blow and erosion to the notion of the nature of democracy. But among those who do trust, you can see for yourself. 5% trust the Knesset most, 7% trust the government, 35% trust the Supreme Court, 9% the rabbinical courts, 5% the chief rabbinate. There is no comparison. And with all due respect to our Ministry of Justice, now I know that what I'm saying may be somewhat difficult to digest. It's not the most PC presentation, and I, in an ordinary circumstance, I think would have been expected to come along with a jug of sugar and coat what I say with a lot of sugar. But it's time we say it as it is. So please understand, at this point, given the path that our leadership has taken, the political leadership has taken, and the rabbinic leadership has taken, the public has no trust in them. None whatsoever. At least no serious percentage. Now, what do Israelis want? And we try to gauge what are the top issues in this area of religion and state that Israelis are interested in. And it's interesting that the highest rating, so to speak, was to the general principle of freedom of religion and equality of burden. And under it came specific issues. And the next thing on Israelis' mind is reducing budgets for yeshivas and religious institutions. And then civil marriage and divorce. And then drafting yeshiva students to the IDF. And then public transportation on Shabbat. And then opening of convenience stores on Shabbat. And then, interestingly, maintaining the status quo. As you can see, only 9% think that that's very important, to maintain the status quo on matters of religion and state. Now, among both Chosen L'Israel, this Israel Resilience, Gantz's party, and among Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid's party, the percentage of those who say we want a civil government and not a unity government is 97%. Now this is fascinating because, as you may have seen in recent days, a number of spokespeople for that merged party are saying we are not ruling out a coalition with the Haredi parties. And when you look at the platform that Hosn Israel published, you'll see some revolutionary items there, but some that are not. So already you see that in terms of the public, including their voters, that path is really not desired. And the question, if you'll continue, okay. And the question that I want to come to a point where, as I said, there's a distinguished, small but distinguished group here, and I want to be able to respond and interact, obviously, with you. So what's clear is that Israeli Jews welcome American Jewish engagement in support of the core values of the Declaration of Independence. What Chief Justice Barak was saying about Israel being the state of the Jewish people, the notion of religious freedom, the notion of freedom of worship, all receive wide support among Israelis. The question, of course, is what does AZM do about these things? And when we speak about unity and community, I don't know if all of you, I'm sure some of you have had a chance to read the, I think, 2014 important document study published by the JPPI on Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. When Tzipi Livni was Minister of Justice, she entrusted Professor Ruth Gabizon, who then engaged or mandated JPPI to do it, a large-scale review of what do diaspora Jewish leaders think about this notion of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. And this was done through scores of parlor meetings, moderated, structured parlor meetings and seminars, both in the States with participation of senior federation officials and in other Jewish countries with participation of Keren HaYesod leadership and senior lay leaders. And when you read this important report, which has not received sufficient attention, you will see that they summarize and say almost universally what they heard was people feeling that the way religion and state in Israel are aligned is not in keeping with their understanding of Jewish and democratic state. Moreover, they view it as impacting on their lives and positions. So we did a comparative study of the status of marriage freedom in all countries of the world. And we uploaded the findings, 194 countries, we uploaded the findings on an interactive map of the world, and the site is marriage.hiddush.org. And wherever you move the cursor, you'll see the name of the country come up and details regarding marriage freedom in that country coming up, etc. And we coded the results in three colors: black, gray, and white. You can understand easily what that stands for. So black are the countries that impose severe restrictions on the rights of their citizens to marry. Gray are the countries with some restrictions, and white are the countries with marriage freedom. There's lots of additional information on that website, but the map that opens up when you log on to the site is telling. I mean, one look and you get the picture. So there is this black smudge in the middle of the world, which represents 45 countries of the world that impose severe restrictions on the rights of their citizens to marry. Israel is the one and only Western democracy in the world that denies its citizens the right to marry. 67% of those countries are countries that impose Sharia law on their citizens. Not exactly the neighborhood that we pride ourselves for being associated with, not exactly the startup notion, and not exactly what Israeli speakers repeat wherever they are, as Israel being the bastion of democracy and civil rights and, interestingly, religious freedom in the Middle East. Now, what does that mean? It means that for Israelis, over 600,000, according to our calculations, over 600,000 Israeli citizens can't get married. It means that the group that the American Jewish community has been directly responsible for rescuing from bondage, Soviet Jewry. Some million citizens from the former Soviet Union have been resettled in Israel thanks to the organized support of the American Jewish community. Officially, almost 400,000 of them are registered as acher, other, which is, again, a benign way of saying they're Gentiles. They're not Jewish. They're all Israeli citizens under the law of return because they have a Jewish father, Jewish grandfather. None of them has the right to marry. We checked, how do Israelis feel? What do they want? And 82% of those that define themselves as secular, namely more than 4 out of every 5 Israeli secular Jews, which make up about half of the Israeli Jewish population, say, had it been up to me, I would not marry Orthodox. But think about the community that you know. This isn't just about Zionism in support of Israel. This is about unity and community. Think about the communities that you know. At this point, Seth Farber, Rabbi Shul Farber, the founder and director of ITIM, is saying in his assessment, 85% of the children that come to Israel as part of birthright would not be able to prove to the rabbinate to their satisfaction that they're Jewish. I'm suggesting to you carefully that the majority of the children growing up in the Jewish community in America today would not qualify to legally marry in Israel if we are not going to be able to change that. Now, who in any fashion of responsible thinking can think that this, not when I look around the room and see individuals who've been there during the Six-Day War and possibly have some memories either of the Holocaust or grew up in Holocaust survivor homes, etc., founding of the State of Israel, who can seriously think that your children and grandchildren will have that level of affinity, of solidarity with Israel that tells the majority of them, you ain't going to get a seat at the table. As far as we are concerned, you ain't Jewish at all, or you ain't Jewish enough. Now here is the irony. The irony is that we now have the partnership of leading modern Orthodox figures, rabbis, intellectuals, in joining our message. Because here is the irony. The most famous convert in America today is, obviously, Ivanka Trump. Well, Ivanka Trump hasn't made Aliyah yet. But another one of Rabbi Haskell Luxstein's converts did make Aliyah. And she wanted to get married. And she was referred to the rabbinic court in Jerusalem, and the rabbinic court in Jerusalem said, we want to see the conversion certificate. And they said, we don't recognize this Rabbi Luxstein. We don't recognize her as Jewish. She appealed to the Rabbinic Court of Appeal, and the Rabbinic Court of Appeal said, we don't recognize her as Jewish. And she was forced to reconvert under the auspices of the Rabbinic Court of Appeal, and she came out embarrassed, declaring, saying how bad she feels towards her own situation, and Rabbi Luxstein, but she says, what could I do? That was the only way that I could get married. We will soon be coming out with so Rabbi Riskin's conversions are not recognized, And the whole idea behind the conversion bill that Shas is pushing in Israel, and the government, some time ago, the legislative committee of the government approved, the whole idea behind it is not only to push away non-Orthodox conversions, but to push away modern Orthodox conversions. Because as far as the chief rabbinate is concerned, Rabbi Riskin's conversions, Rabbi Stav's conversions, Rabbi Rabinowitz's conversions are an anathema. We have been asking the question since Hiddush started in 2009. We have been asking the question of, do you support or oppose that the state of Israel will recognize equally all forms of marriage, including Orthodox, civil, Reform, and conservative? In 2009, 53% said yes. Consistently, that percentage has gone up to the point that now, in the last survey in 2018, 70% are saying yes. There is no question, whatever Minister Shaked may tell you, whatever Consul General Dayan may tell you, there is no question that they are misrepresenting the position of the majority of Israelis. This is not where Israelis are. And the question that I think you need to ask yourselves is, where are you? Because this directly impacts on your family members, on your friends, on your children. And the question is whether we understand that there is no way that we can maintain unity in the community if we allow this coerced attempt at uniformity dictate the nature of Jewish life in Israel. So with Rabbi Mark Angel, I worked for a long time, and we wrote together a document that we labeled Vision Statement, Israel as a Jewish Democratic State. This, unlike, and for some of you, you are familiar with the Gabizon Meidan covenant. So Professor Ruth Gabizon and Rabbi Yaakov Meidan developed a document, an opus magnum. It's a book about an alternative configuration of religion and state. Very interesting, advanced, and I'm not sure that there are more than 25 people in the country who have read it, because it's a book. What we did is, it has 8 paragraphs, and it starts out as the preamble with a context that makes it clear this is a pro-Israel, Israel-oriented, committed to the well-being of Israel attempt. And then in 8 paragraphs, we attempted to suggest what kind of substantive change needs to happen. Sorry, Gordon, not now. What kind of substantive change needs to happen for Israel in this area of religion and state to be truly Jewish and democratic? It's short, it's concise, but it's bold. And it addresses every issue. And the important thing about it is not just that Rabbi Mark Angel and I wrote it. The important thing is that if you log on to the document, which enables you to sign online, you will see that it has been endorsed by leading figures in Orthodoxy, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Renewal, people of diverse political views from, let's say, Dov Zakheim and Steve Boehm of the American Jewish Committee to left-wing activists. Because this does not correlate to the division on left and right. We keep out of that division. We feel that support for religious freedom and equality is something that is indeed advancing unity and is unifying, not divisive. Because such a majority supports this core value, because this is not an import value from America, this is a homeborn, homegrown concept that you find at the heart of the Declaration of Independence, and it's supported widely, as you will see in the list, by both Israelis and American Jews. So what we suggest in terms of unity and community is that it's time to move away from dealing with damage control, addressing the scandal of the week and the crisis of the month, and go back to the drawing board and give thought. Now, you don't have to accept this particular document, but go back to the drawing board and think through strategically and holistically what is the vision of Israel that would ensure unity, that would ensure democratic backbone, nature, and would ensure maintaining a strong Jewish character. I think it's an affront to American Jewry to hear both Prime Minister Netanyahu, in a briefing he gave the Israeli press when he came to the UN a few months ago, and Minister of Diaspora Affairs Naftali Bennett when he spoke recently at the AJC and a few other places. Namely, we have a problem, Houston. We have a problem, American Zionist movement. Our communities are growing apart. There's a rift between Israel and American Jewry. And why is there a rift? They know exactly why there is a rift. Not our fault. He says explicitly, not Israel's fault. Says Danny Dayan, says Netanyahu, says Bennett, not our fault. It's your fault. Because you are straying away from Judaism. Now, of course, Naftali Bennett has the antidote. And he has the antidote and is willing to pay for it with Israeli taxpayers' money. So this original idea of the joint initiative in which the Jewish Agency was part, that was looking at these very questions, has fallen apart. The Jewish Agency was either left or was pushed. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not privy. Pushed, okay. And alternative forces were identified. And the State of Israel is investing $30 million a year in ensuring that your children's Jewish identity is strengthened and your bonds with Israel are revitalized. And who's best equipped to do it in using the government's and the philanthropists' money? 2/3 of the money are allocated to Chabad Lubavitch and to Olami, which is an offshoot of Aish Torah. I haven't heard much uprising. Unity and community require that we assess boldly and truthfully the crisis that is in the making. However much we want to, pinch our cheeks and make them appear rosy, there is a serious problem. Everyone knows it. There are elements in that problem that we have no control over, and we should be explaining that they cannot be overcome in the short term. And that has to do with the peace process, that has to do with the settlements. This has to do with genuine difference of opinion between Israelis and many American Jews. It is what it is. But there is an area that is disruptive, that is undermining unity, and will in the long run ensure that the next generation will not feel solidarity with Israel. And that is if they are told, you're not part of this enterprise. Listen to Aish Torah and maybe you'll see the light. That's not the prescription that's going to heal the rift. And therefore, we propose a holistic, alternative vision statement on Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. We propose that you look not only at what makes you tick, but you also look at what makes Israelis tick, and don't take Danny Dayan's and Ayelet Shaked's word for it. Look at the figures yourselves. And you will see that consistently the majority of Israelis want, what do they want? They want what was promised in 1948. That's the Israel they want. They want the Jewish state. It's not that they don't want the Jews. They want the Jewish state that is very much along these lines of liberty, justice, and peace as taught by the Hebrew prophets. that are the law of return. It's a Jewish state, it's a state of the Jewish people. By the way, that is why there is, generally speaking, support for the notion of the nation-state bill in Israel. But what should also be known, and we have done studies on that, and others have done studies on that, what should also be known is that every survey shows that yes, Israelis support the nation-state bill, and they support majority, clear majority supports, that the principle of equality be added onto it and enacted in a way that would balance it out and make it Jewish and democratic. So that's my insiders sharing with you. And as I said, כולכם חכמים, כולכם נבונים, כולכם יודעים את התורה. So I'm open to, well, thank you. So the question is, you're asking me to respond to the challenge of the nation-state basic law, especially with regard to the negative impact this had on the Druze community, which is loyal and involved and integrated into Israeli society. The interesting thing is that different groups within Israel reacted differently. And as you may remember, there was the large demonstration that was initiated by the Druze leadership that brought together, again, almost 100,000, around that number, people who demonstrated in support of their position. And they could not demonstrate together with the leadership of the Arab community. Because, one second. Because the Arab community that also protested the nation-state bill had a different agenda. So if you ask me specifically about the Druze community, it's clear that the Druze community has no problem whatsoever with the definition of Israel as a Jewish state. What they want is to ensure that their equality and integration in Israeli society is seen as a natural, favored, not favorite, but something that is positive, accepted, and welcomed. And therefore, we go back to what I said before. The majority of the public, including many in the right, agree that what needs to happen is keep the nation-state law. By the way, the original drafts were far worse. Keep the nation-state law, but add the element of equality and grant equality constitutional stand and protection, which is not the case now. So there is an easy answer. Some, such as now this Kahol Lavan party, are saying exactly that. They say one of the things we will do is introduce the principle of equality as part of a constitutional legislation, either in the nation-state law or in a different basic law. So that's part of the debate. This has relatively an easy and simple answer. Yes, Michael. The question is Israeli politics is what it is. Ultimately, it's Israelis that vote and it's their decision. What kind of pressure points, what kind of power should we exert? What is it that we should be focusing on, and what is it that realistically we can do? So the following, I think, should be borne in mind. First of all, we should define what's the end game. What is it that we are trying to achieve? And what I'm suggesting is that we look at it on two levels. For the more sophisticated, the more committed, we should look at it from the perspective of a holistic approach, such as the vision statement on Israel as a Jewish democratic state. Use it as a basis for leadership discussions, adult education, youth programming, etc. Namely, let's take a holistic approach rather than a separate discussion of this, that, and the other. Let's look at a holistic document and see if we can come together as a community around a an alternative paradigm and an alternative vision. We suggest this, and it has sufficiently diverse support, both religiously and politically, to merit taking it seriously. But at the same time, when you look at a vision, even if it's contained in one page, 8 bullet points, it's still complicated. So if we are to look at one element that should be sort of the top practical flag that we raise, I believe, and we were able to convince both the JFNA and the American Jewish Committee of that, and I hope you would consider it as well. We believe that that is the right to family, the freedom to marry, because it will affect your children and the ability of your children and others to relate to Israel in a situation where they are told you are not going to have a seat at the table, an equal seat at the table. And this affects... Huh?
Finish it up, but this will be it.
Oh. And this affects hundreds of thousands of Israelis who can't marry. And it's supported by an overwhelming majority of Israelis. I will suggest, and I'm saying that with mixed feelings, I will suggest that the obsession with the wall has not been a well-chosen strategic bottom line that would rally identification and support among Israelis. And just imagine we are successful. It happened. What kind of change does it introduce to the larger scheme of things? I can tell you that doing away with the monopoly of the chief rabbinate over marriage and enabling every couple, whether same-sex or not, the basic human right of marriage, that would really transform the system. Having the Robinson's Arch area, upgraded, etc., it's important. I'm not belittling it. But to think that for the last 5 years, the leadership of our movements have seen this as basically the be-all and end-all of their aspiration to effect change in Israel, not quite. So Daniel Gordis, following the breakdown in June of 2017, when the cabinet suspended the Kotel agreement and when the ministerial committee approved the conversion bill, and then the Jewish agency canceled the festive dinner with Netanyahu, etc., etc., Daniel Gordis wrote an article. He responded to your question without hearing your question because somebody else asked him. And he said 2 things. One, I wholeheartedly agree with. Namely, he presented the questions that we need to ask. And the other was his specific recommendations, which I have a serious problem with. The questions he presented were, A, American Jewry has to decide. Do they want to complain or do they want to win? If they want to win, namely to effect change, then we need to ask the question, does the American Jewish community have the stomach to do what it takes? And is there sufficient unity within the Jewish community behind it? I think these are 2 questions that everyone that looks at what do we do next and asks the question that you ask should be asking. His recommendation was stop flying El Al, stop supporting Israel's hospitals. Not that Israel's hospitals are to blame. They're not. But they should be telling Netanyahu, what are you doing? Now, I have a different version, but whatever it is, it can't be talk, talk, talk. The notion of assembling yet another dialogue group is not going to make any difference. The question is by Solomon, who is on the right religiously of conservative Judaism, namely moderate Orthodox, modern Orthodox, Zionist Orthodox, however you may choose to define it. But what you're asking is, how can we work together on this, and how do we bring the Orthodox community to align in a sort of a manageable and systematic way with that vision? And what I'm saying, we have made significant headway. So, for instance, as I said, Rabbi Mark Angel and I wrote it as a joint statement of a highly regarded modern Orthodox rabbi and a Reform rabbi. But what you have is support of individuals such as Yitz Greenberg and such as Asher Lopatin, and as I said, Joffa, and such as Daniel Hartman and David Rosen and many others, and lay Orthodox leaders such as Dov Zakheim, as I said, and Steve Boehm, etc. We went one step further, and maybe we can collaborate on that. We created a network of rabbis, now rabbis and kenters, for religious freedom and equality in Israel. Because Hiddush is not part of the conservative or reform or a secular group, we felt the need to create Hiddush not to compete with reform or conservative or others, but to add a trans-denominational dimension. So we created Ruach Hiddush. Ruach Hiddush is Rabbanim v'Chazanim leman Chofesh Dat v'Shivyon b'Yisrael. Rabbis and kenters for religious freedom and equality in Israel. It is chaired by YU Yitzchak Elchanan rabbinic graduate, who is a Talmud professor, Michael Chernik. In the small executive committee, in addition to him, we have Asher Lopatin, which again shows you, to those who know Asher, shows that this brings together different political views. This does not pit left against right, because this is not what we get involved in. Michael Chernik, Asher Lopatin, Gordon Tucker, Reform, Reconstructionist, and Renewal, working together to advance the vision statement and to bring to the fore a joint voice from Orthodox to Renewal. I think that there is a lot more that we can do on that. The reality now is different than what I remember 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because now this isn't just about open-minded Orthodox intellectuals and rabbis and activists, but the realization that we're in the same boat. Namely, as far as the powers that be in Israel, namely the chief rabbinate and the Haredi parties, they are as excluded and as delegitimized and at times demonized as Reform and Conservative. And therefore there is further incentive, and it's interesting because Asher Lopatin, we spoke to him a few years ago, he did not feel comfortable joining. And more recently he said, I've tried, it's clear to me this is the only way. So I look forward to working, and beyond that, it's not just that our strength is in our numbers. Our strength is in our ability to present an across-the-board religious and political camp that says the time has come to embrace a vision of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, a vision of Zionism, which goes to the heart of Israel's Declaration of Independence and fully realizes that promise of inclusiveness, of tolerance, of freedom, and of dignity. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.